Welcome to the Mindcraft podcast. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and I am here with the amazing Jim Stutz, who I met in our mastermind group, and he is an amazing individual. Jim is a former retired middle school teacher who is now very interested in creating online platforms for learning, and I am so super stoked to have Jim with us here today. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much, Kim. I really appreciate you inviting me to be here today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation and continuing some of the things that we've discussed in the past.
Excellent. Well, I'll tell you, I often have guests send me some bullets and get an idea and things like that. And one thing that had me sort of immediately enamored is we have two boats, and one of their names. And Jim started out his sort of like excitement about talking about his own journey of self-discovery with a very famous quote by Shakespeare, which is "To thine own self be true," which was said by Hamlet, right? So
Actually,
maybe
it was
Jim, go ahead.
Polonius, I believe.
Oh, what
I
was it?
believe it was Polonius
Okay, so
speaking
I'm
to
wrong
his
about
son
that.
Laertes.
Okay. All right. So that is not my area of expertise. However, it is Jim's. And so I think, Jim, why don't you go ahead and maybe start us off with why that quote really resonates with you as you kind of are feeling it with what you shared with me about growing up and finding yourself.
hmm Sure. Well, on almost, I think, a subconscious level, I was reading a book recently about the Myers-Briggs personality types, and mine is INFJ. And this book said the motto of the INFJ person pretty much is "To thine own self be true," because we're so driven to finding purpose in our lives, whether it's with our work, our relationships, or anything that's really important. And I took a course when I was in my mid 20s through Landmark Education, and the beginning of the course they had that quote written on the board: "To thine own self be true." And then the course leader asked us, well, what self? What are they talking about? What self, to what self should we be true? And that was the whole purpose of that particular course. It was a 4-day, very long days exploratory course of really digging deep inside to find the elements of ourselves that really felt most authentic, and then building a life around that. And it's that pursuit of true self, who we really are at our core, that I think is the most important quest we can undertake in life. And in our culture, we get so many things stacked up on top of that from a young age that we don't really get a lot of encouragement to take that journey. And so I think those that take it upon themselves and get closer and closer to who they truly are end up having lives that are much more fulfilling.
Jim, I love this. I'll tell you right now because it seems like what you're tapping into is really almost sort of like an existential crisis going on in today's society. And you and I have talked, different places on the weekends we were on, and maybe you can tell us why does it seem that people, maybe you don't feel this way, I don't know, but it seems like people in general are often not in touch at all with their authentic selves. Why is that, do you think?
I think in a Western society, especially in American society, I think it goes back to the foundational aspects from when Europeans started coming here with this puritanical work ethic and this almost, well, not even almost, it was part of much of that kind of practice that in order to earn one's way to heaven, you had to suffer severely. we've sort of carried that forward in a lot of ways in our culture in America, and that carries over to, this idea of just constantly working. And there's this such a lack of balance where you see other cultures, even in Europe, many cultures there, in Spain, they still close everything down at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever time it is, and they all relax for a couple of hours. And they, have long meals every night, and there's this balance in their lives that in America we've decided is there's not it's not valued. And I mean, that's just one of several reasons I think that contribute to this condition of we don't have time to stop and ask those kind of questions. Like, am I enjoying my life? What does that have to do with anything? I'm trying to get enough money to buy a Mercedes. And I just think that's been woven into our culture from its establishment as from the time Europeans started coming here.
Wow. And then we sort of fast forward to 2024, right? We're flying around like gerbils on crack, filling up our lives with people often laugh when I say that, but I kind of can picture like just kind of,
Oh yeah, it's a great
just
metaphor.
yeah, right? Because I think, you and I have talked about this. I think that it's really become habitual. We become conditioned to fill our lives up with busyness, busy dashness, not business, right? Just
Yes, absolutely.
what do you are you okay? So that seems like it's a conditioned dynamic. Fill ourselves up, and I don't
Hmm.
think that's all about money necessarily. I think it is a lot, but I don't think all of it. Tell me what you think about that.
No, I think you're right. No, I don't. I think money's just one aspect of it. I think again, it's just this sort of idea that if you're not constantly busy, that you're lazy
Right,
and you're wasting time. And there's nothing in our culture that has ever celebrated the idea of reflection,
right.
and that there's something valuable about that, about taking time off or doing nothing, or having images of like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn just sitting on a riverbank fishing for 4 hours or something,
Right,
and
right, right.
probably not saying two words during that time. But when it comes to the culture writ large, I think America has just always had this obsession with achievement.
Mm-hmm.
Whether again, money is part of that, but not always. And I see, like you said, fast forward to today, and I see young kids, if they express any interest in a sport or art or anything, suddenly it becomes their career, and they're 7 years old and they're going to practice literally 6 days a week outside of school, and there's no place for just fun.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. The a book is coming into my mind, and I don't remember the author. It came out a while ago because this has been going on for a while, right? It was called The Overscheduled
Yes.
Child, and
Hmm.
in the author talked about what this is doing to the kids because we're actually teaching them to be
Yes.
detached from their authentic self. We're actually not only teaching it to them, but rewarding it. Like, way to go! You're in
Right.
you're in piano, soccer, you're learning Swahili, and then
Right.
later you're going to be in the Young Entrepreneurs Club. And oh, how old were you again? Oh, 11. Oh, good for you.
Right. Yeah. And then talk about derailing any sense of finding an authentic self. I mean, you know, it's never been a large part of our culture to go down that path to begin with. But like you said, now you've got kids at such young ages just being so overloaded with work and stress and busyness. There's no chance of them ever feeling or hearing or sensing an inner call.
And so, tell me this, Jim, because I'm gonna guess you've probably given this a ton of thought yourself. What do you think that the cost? Because to me, this seems like the stakes are high here. What is the cost on two levels? Okay, the child who will eventually be an adult, and what about societal cost with this conditioning of emptiness is really, to me, what it sounds like. We're running away from authenticity, the inner voice, the passion, what we're meant to do on this earth, and everything that brings us joy. So what's the cost?
And it's moments like that where real connection is built and discovery is made about oneself and about the people that we're with. And we've pretty much eliminated, for most of us, the opportunity to have those moments. So then expand on that societally, and you've got, like you said, just a society of hamsters on crack, and people are just pinging off the walls. And we hear so much now about stress and burnout and suicides and drug abuse, and all these things. And I think that's the inevitable end to a life that's lived in that kind of chaos.
No, I 100% agree with you. And then, and really, not to be blunt, but this is what I think of. As far as we know, this is not a dress rehearsal going on right here, right?
Right.
This is light. This is the real thing. We do the things we have the whatever we're doing in our lives, and then it's over, and we're gone. So our life minutes, there's nothing more valuable. It seems like we just throw them away like the Monopoly money. I was going to see what you think about this, Jim, because we were in a restaurant not that long ago, and it was a family of four, just like what you were talking about, mom, dad, and two teenagers, and all four of them were on their phones. All four, mom, dad, and both kids were sitting together separately on there. And
Yeah.
I couldn't, try not to judge. We all know it's not the greatest. I could not help the thoughts that were rolling through my mind. And I don't know that it was so much judgment. It wasn't like the parents, we all do the best we can as parents, whatever. My thoughts were, this is tragic. Not even just sad. It's actually tragic. Because that time with your children, their time with their parents is so limited. What are you doing? And just to add to it a little bit, it was that kind of like a ski resorty place. So the view, they were at a window seat. The view right next to them would take your breath away. Mountains, was a
Yeah.
tram. It was during the summertime, but the tram was running for people to look at the sunset. Absolutely breathtaking. And they're like this, all four of them scrolling. I mean, tell me what
Yeah.
your thoughts are on the whole social media thing with this.
I would agree with you. I think the word tragic is apt, because of its cost. Um, if you take that same family 20 years ago, before they all had cell phones, and sat them at a table together, they'd have no other choice but to, maybe their relationship's good and maybe it's not, but still they would have no choice but to find some way to interact with one another. I would think, the average parent would be interested in what their child did that day and what they're feeling about something. And, the parents could share maybe an experience from their own life that would help that child give some context to some new experience, or any of the innumerable things that happen when we are actually in relation with one another, with another person. And if we're not going to do that, then kind of like you're getting at, why are we here?
I can
If we're
agree.
not here to connect with other people and support one another and help each other grow and learn, then I'm not quite sure why we're here.
100%. And we could get deep and spiritual about that too. It seems like we've replaced relational with transactional. That's what it seems like
Yeah.
to me. When you were speaking just now, Jim, it just took my head to when I was younger, and my younger sister and I, when my mother used to make eggplant parmesan, which the rest of the world loved. Neither one of us were a fan of those little tasteless frisbees masquerading as a delicious lasagna, because that's what it smelled like when you walked in. Like, yay, it's like a baked ziti with meatballs, and because they smell the same, right? So you talk
Yeah.
about interacting. My sister and I used to literally, we were so strategic about how to get the little pieces while she looked the other direction into a napkin to pass them to each other under the table. And I'm remembering that at 59 years old, and we were, like 11 and 6 at the time. But there was interaction even though there was no talking. Like, we're in this together.
Mhm.
We thought it was a baked ziti, and it turned out to be this horrible eggplant, bad excuse for a vegetable, and we're in it as a team. We're going to get rid of it without mom noticing, and then fill up on garlic bread. Like, it was like a team thing.
Right.
And I couldn't help
Yeah.
thinking about that because imagine had we just been with cell phone, we were just scrolling through that and being told
Yeah.
to eat
You may
eggplant
as
we
well.
couldn't stand. There's no memory. It's
Yeah.
horrible. It was like a little bonding thing that went on with, us against the parents. It was great.
Absolutely.
you know.
Totally. Yeah.
Um, so Jim, I have another question for you because you tapped into this, and obviously it's up to you if you want to, sort of enrich us with. You had some. I know you had some experiences as a boy and a teenager, but also with that restaurant example, we were both talking. Well, you talking about the other family of four on their trip, and what happens specifically with kids, right? Because if the adults are leading the dance, hopefully, right? So it's not the
Yeah.
same if we say how are the adults. I mean, you could take that into a level with relationships with adults, but specifically with the parents and the kids or teenagers, you talked a lot about being or that feeling of invisibility, and I'm wondering if you can touch on that because I think just from what I see in my own life, that is definitely a thing right now. The kid with a and
Mm.
sometimes I'll see a mom walking a baby, and she's like this on a gorgeous
Yeah.
day with the stroller. So maybe touch on the invisibility potential casualty of this.
Sure. You mean in terms of my own personal experience with it,
I think go wherever you want to go. I think you've had the
or just
experience, and
okay?
then maybe leapfrog into now it's
Hmm.
happening on this like big scale.
Yeah. Well, I'll just answer more. I'm happy to talk about my personal experience, but I think what you're getting at is the ultimate output or outcome of being on the receiving end of that,
Hmm.
feeling that you're the invisible one. And for me, and I think this is probably true for anybody that experiences it, even let's say an adult in a maybe a relationship or a marriage that um, they're not being attended to properly. And it makes the person who's made to feel invisible uh, question who they even are. Like, if the people that I'm closest to or that I'm supposed to be closest to, the people that are supposed to love me and nurture me and pay attention to me and help me develop, if they're not doing that and they're just leaving me to stumble through my own life, especially as a child, um, and I'm not getting any guidance, and I'm not having people point out to me like, I've noticed like you really like drawing, or you're really good at building things, or whatever that child is starting to naturally express as a talent. If nobody ever stops and points that out to that young person and finds positive ways to nurture that without going overboard like we do now, like, oh, you like drawing, let's get you into an art academy and get you with,
Right, 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 right,
a
right, right.
coach and all that stuff. It's like, no, let the kid just play,
Hmm.
but pay attention to it.
Right.
Um, I believe I've heard Deepak Chopra talk about that with his own children. Like, he made it a point to really start observing them when they got to the age 4 or 5, that they were starting to have personalities of their own and starting to discover talents of their own. And in a healthy, balanced way, nurturing those talents so that as they grew, they would become more fulfilled as human beings. But when all of that is just ignored and you are left
Right.
to, as a child, to wonder, like, if nobody notices me, nobody's noticing me, especially the people that should be, why do I matter? Do I matter? Does
Yes.
anything I say or think or do matter? And so you grow up really insecure about anything like that, and you just start grasping, like, well, maybe I should behave this way then to get some kind of attention or approval, or maybe I should be with these kind of friends or have this kind of person as a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and you're always trying to fit into someone else's idea of the way you should be, or someone else's, what you think is their idea of the way you should be. You're just constantly trying different things because you have no idea who you really are. And it's incredibly painful, and it will lead to inevitable series of failures in whether it's with work, relationships, or just feeling comfortable in your own skin.
Right.
And, it took me into my mid to late 40s before these things started to work themselves out.
Oh, I appreciate your honesty and courage so much, Jim, because I think it's only when we really allow ourselves to be raw with our emotions, to be so relatable. Because I know there are so many people out there who can identify with this, with that inner child that, felt invisible for whatever reasons. And also, because I wrote down a couple things here, because you tapped into I think some pretty common pain points, because
Mm.
our sense of value obviously comes from early mirroring of our value, by people who matter the most. So for us to figure out our value by when you pull the mirror away, that presents a big challenge. And I think many of us, some of my story too, spend our midlife years kind of putting the puzzle pieces together. Because if that part's missing, it makes it very tough to navigate, when you're not really sure about this. You've been fragmented in a way, right? Sort of. I don't know how to maybe say it properly, but. And then the
Yeah, no,
attachment to
absolutely. I
that
like,
is the shame. That's the part of thinking something's wrong with you.
yes. Yeah. I like the way you put it about not being able to navigate, because it is like just busting the rudder off of a sailboat, or a boat that uses a rudder. I don't know enough about sailing or boating to know, but it's, yeah, you don't have a navigational device. That's what I was getting at by saying you're just like grasping at whatever, like maybe this will work, maybe that'll work, and you're
Right.
always trying to get approval
Yes.
for who you are, or who you think other people want you to be. And it's so unsatisfying, deeply unsatisfying.
Deeply unsatisfying. And actually, because I've done some talks on that particular part of what you're saying, and I've come to kind of refer to that as soul hole filling, because what we often do when the authentic good feels, we need, that's not a want, that's a need, right, as a human being. We need the
Yeah.
authentic good feels. When we don't have the authentic good feels, which are within, right, we tend to go chasing the drinking, the smoking, like you brought, the people pleasing, looking for constant reassurance in our relationships. We're searching for those good feels outside of us because they're missing on the inside. And it's like trying to water flowers with a water can that has a hole in it. You just, a little bit of water, but it doesn't do it. Or it's like trying to get nutrition out of a bag of potato chips. You keep digging, 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 but you're still hungry because you didn't find what you really need, right? And that's
Hmm.
like you used the word insatiable, which is what brought me to there. And that of course is the shame piece, which is that we kind of learn, from what you were saying, Jim. That's where I kind of grasp onto that one. We kind of learn, since we don't know, with the mirror yanked away, right? We can kind of learn that something's wrong with us, and that's when we try to fit into all these
Oh, yeah.
places, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. From as far back as I can remember, I have conscious memory. Yeah, I always felt like there was something not right about me. Something wasn't right about me. Um, I didn't get approval for just being myself. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I had a few instances where when I did venture to say or do something that was authentically me and it was rebuked, that just confirmed there was something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you retreat even deeper
Right.
inside and you just stuff down as far as you can anything that is an authentic piece of you because you're convinced that it's flawed.
No, I think that's just so important. And in my personal opinion, if we could wipe shame off the face of the earth, we would have very few, if any, problems. It's the source of, there wouldn't be a need for therapists anymore for sure. Probably wouldn't be
Mhm.
any wars. So wouldn't really that feeling of being broken, damaged goods is what drives all things unhealthy and unenjoyable. Really, that.
Yep.
And I think to go back to this to wrap it into that feeling of sort of original worthiness, which is what we're kind of touching on, that we lose when it's not mirrored for us. We're born with it. We come into this
Hmm.
world as wet little cherubs,
Yep.
completely flawless, and we know that we're loved and cherished and wanted and all those things. Something happens between there and midlife that we have to kind of work out, and where do I want to go with that? I want to maybe wrap it into what you said here at the bullet you gave me at the end, Jim. You talked about Lao Tzu, and this was related to the
Mhm.
journey of self discovery and that longing and searching for the real you, your real the authentic self that started out this way as a child, and then stuff happened. And you said you might want to correct my quoting here, maybe, but to attain knowledge, we need to add things every day, and to attain wisdom, we need to subtract things every day. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate for us if I even said that appropriately?
Yeah. No, that's correct.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, when we're gaining knowledge, I mean, first of all, there's a difference, obviously. Knowledge is knowing things. One plus one is two. You know, how many planets are in the solar system, how many states are in the country.
Right.
This is all knowledge, and it's good and it's helpful. But, ultimately, when we're talking about the big questions of life, nobody cares about that, right? At the end of our lives, nobody cares about all this stuff. It's wisdom. Did we
Mm-hmm.
gain wisdom along the way? Do we gain the wisdom about what really matters? Were we able to figure that out and bring it into our own lives and share it with the people that mattered most to us, especially, I think, if we have children? And just like I liked your image of, a baby being born and it's naked, it has nothing, but it knows its own perfection. And as we grow and experience hurts and disappointments and shoulds and shouldn'ts and all that stuff,
Right.
um, I always have this image in my mind of like that baby, like a drawing of that baby, and with each new negative thing we experience, it's like putting a post-it note on that picture. And by the time we're 5 years old, how many post-it notes are covering up that authentic self? And then by the time we're 10 and 15 and 20, so to gain wisdom, we have to start peeling those notes off one
I
by
love
one,
that.
to start to get back to who was I back then?
Right.
Who am I now? Because that doesn't change. You're who you are. You are born that way,
Right.
you
100%.
know? And that part of us, that eternal part of us, stays the same, even underneath all the slings and arrows, as Shakespeare had wrote, that we suffer during our lives. And so to get to that point of wisdom, we have to start removing the things that no longer work for us. They don't help us to, they don't bring love, they don't bring joy, you know? And so, like, I go back to, this is, like the kid that has practice 6 days a week. Like, what if you as a parent said, I value my child's time to do other things, so Mr. or Miss Coach, I'll give you 3 days a week. And if that's not enough for you, then we'll go somewhere else, because I value other things. And so it's, again, so we've just taken 3 out of the 6 days and devoted those to something else. And so I think when we have an adult who is in this situation we talked about earlier, where they're just kind of drowning and they're the hamster on crack, I think you can start by asking them, like, what's missing from your life that you would like, or what's something that's in it now that you want less of, and can we just start to make little adjustments to removing, taking away the things that aren't bringing us real satisfaction.
And joy,
Yeah.
Jim. I think in many ways it saddens me to think that we become so conditioned that I don't want to say as extreme as joyless society, but I think it seems that it's significantly diminished from what it used to be. In fact, I heard a thing on the radio. It was around the holidays, around Christmas. They said a Christmas list. It was like 1932 or something. Like an average Christmas list of a kid who was like 9. And mittens was first, and it was something like, it might have been chocolates, like so basic, not like a PS4 or a Game Boy. Those are outdated. But like a brand new game station or something. Mittens was first. I remember that, and it was some really small thing. And it was only 2. And less. I think we say less is more. It sounds so cliche, but I think it wouldn't be so bad for us to circle around back to that.
I absolutely agree, especially again in our culture, where
Right.
even people that we in our culture might consider poor compared to the rest of the world live like royalty. And so, we have a really, in America especially, a very sort of skewed vision of what it means to have joy and prosperity, because I think about, sometimes I'll walk into a grocery store and I think, I'll just stop for a second and think, my goodness, look at all the food in this one place. And like, we don't think anything of how easy it is for just to go to the grocery store and buy whatever we want, and then there's people who every day walk 4 miles round trip to get a bucket of water.
Right.
So I think we need to really revisit and be exposed to the reality of other people's lives and realize, like, we have so much more than we need. And there is actually studies that show, like, humans are happiest when they have what they need and a little bit extra.
Oh, exactly.
At both extremes of the spectrum, if you have too little and you're struggling and struggling and struggling, that's obviously not maximal for human existence. And at the other extreme, when you've got so much you just don't know what to do with it, there's also a lack of joy and satisfaction, believe it or not. I'm all for that. I'm obsessed with the idea of simplicity and simplifying our lives, especially again in our culture. Whether that could be material possessions, it could be activity, it could be putting the phones away so we can talk to each other over dinner. There's so many areas where just little simple adjustments would result in great happiness if people would be willing to go there. And it kind of reminds me of, the biblical story of, the person that came to Jesus and said, what can I do to follow you? I really want to follow you. And he said, sell everything you have. And the guy was like, oh, I can't do that. So, not going to go there. And it's like, well, okay, what are you willing to give in order to have a happier life? Are you willing to consider that maybe the key to happier life is less and not more.
I love that, and that's a fantastic way to wind it up too, because the law of, instead of the law of attraction, the law of subtraction, right? So
Yeah.
to
Yes.
Aaron Doughty, actually I can't take credit for that. That's Aaron Doughty. He's an influencer out there. I watch him sometimes, and he talks about that. Like if you want that new outfit in your closet, but you've got a packed closet full of things you haven't worn in 3 years, get rid of it and create the space for the, So I think if we expand, that's what you're saying, Jim. We've got to get rid of, whether it's, not just the things, but the time scarcity we have too. Get rid of the things we're doing. Pick one club instead of four in college, or
Yes.
whatever. But
Yes.
to expand, again, to not just get rid of the stuff, but to get rid of the busyness and create a
Yep.
not to do list. Really is fantastic. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so this
Yeah.
so this sounds great, Jim. Wow, it's been so much food for thought here. So much wisdom that you've shared with us very authentically and also very generously with your own story. And so I'm going to direct our listeners. You will be able to find Jim's contact information if you choose to pursue. You have questions or want to pursue some more conversations. That will be available below. And I would just like to thank you, Jim, for using your life minutes in this way to be with all of us. Because there is no greater compliment, right, than to be with myself and all of our listeners. So thank you very much for being
Thank you.
here.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real privilege.